Thank you for listening to the Speaking with Confidence podcast. Give us a review to tell everyone why you love the podcast. You can also download, like, and share the podcast with friends. Be sure to visit formingforpublicspeaking.com and sign up for Forming for Public Speaking course. It's a step-by-step system to help you become the confident and powerful speaker you've always wanted to be. Welcome to Speaking with Confidence, a podcast that's here to help you unlock the power of effective public speaking. I'm your host, Tim Newman, and I'm excited to take you on a journey to become a better, more confident communicator. Juanita Wheeler has coached over 100 TEDx speakers in addition to CEOs, entrepreneurs, authors, researchers, and change makers to deliver presentations worthy of their great ideas. Juanita is a public speaking coach, speechwriter, the CEO and head of curation at TEDx Brisbane, and the founder of Full and Frank. She has over 2 decades of speaking experience as an adjunct lecturer at the University of Queensland and is a global fellow with the Atlantic Fellows based out of Oxford University. Juanita has 3 master's degrees, 2 in business and 1 in social change leadership. Juanita, welcome to Speaking with Confidence. I'm really excited to talk to you today. I think you and I are built the same way. We think the same way, and our approaches, I think, are very, very similar. So welcome to Speaking with Confidence podcast.
Thank you so much, Tim. I absolutely agree, and it is a delight to be here.
Well, one of the things that really intrigued me about you is, you're the CEO of TEDx Brisbane, and how did that come about, and what does that actually mean? Because, I think everybody knows TED and TEDx, and they see these things, but I don't think they really truly understand how it works or how it happens. So how did you get to be involved in this?
Well, when it first started, I was just like everybody else who loves TED Talks. I loved them. I watched them online. They were a really important part of my day or my week. I could get gems of wisdom from people who were experts or had lots of experience in a really short and digestible amount of time because I was a busy person. So they were great. And I obviously talked about them a lot more than I had realized I did. Because one day when I was doing my first master's, one of my fellow students said to me, those talks you're always talking about? Yes. She said, well, I hear there's going to be a local event here in Brisbane, a small one. It's going to be at South Bank, TEDx South Bank Women. There are only 100 tickets. You have to apply to be in the audience. Shall we do it? And I'm like, yes. So I applied and I was lucky enough to be offered one of the spots in the audience. It was just the time was getting close that I actually started to get a little anxious about it because I'm like, this is a bit high risk because I love TED Talks. And what if I go to this local thing and it's, a bit ho-hum? Is that going to diminish my love of TED in any way? But I really shouldn't have worried. It was amazing. I say to people when they ask about our events, I said, if watching a TED Talk is like watching a really amazing music video, then coming to our events live is like going to a rock show. That's the difference. So I loved it in the audience. And actually about 6 to 8 weeks later, there was a confluence of a number of factors, but that was one of them. I quit my job in corporate and left and went, wow, those people are inspiring and they're doing these incredible things with their lives. I don't want to sit in the audience and watch that person. I want to be that person, who is doing bold and audacious things, in the area where they're an expert. So the second year, they asked me to come back as a volunteer because I'd stayed in touch. It's a volunteer-run organization, so at the TEDx level. So I'm like, absolutely, I'd love to volunteer. So that was the next year. And then the year after, they actually asked me to come and speak. So in 2014, so a decade ago, I gave my own TEDx talk, which was based on the topic the space I was working in at the time, which was about charity and the way that charities are funded. And then the person who ran the TEDx, and we'd grown to know each other and work each other through volunteering and speaking, called me up and said she had this amazing career opportunity to do a contract job in London working for Richard Branson, which obviously you say,
takes care of that.
You say yes to that.
Right.
And she said, we had a team meeting and said, you're the person that we want to take over and run it. So I did. 2016 was my first event. And shortly after that, before our 2017 event, we got the title bump to a citywide license and became TEDx Brisbane, which is very exciting. And we've been running it ever since.
That's an amazing story. Again, I don't think people understand. I didn't know until talking to you that it's a volunteer organization and it's pretty much volunteers that do everything and plan everything. And so you started this, but you got on stage. Did you have a fear of public speaking, or do you have a fear of public speaking? And what was that process like in preparing to do a TEDx for you?
Well, the TEDx talk was a fair way down my public speaking journey. But when I first started, I absolutely had a fear of public speaking. And public speaking is not my favorite thing. I'm a screaming introvert. So if you think of like the introvert extrovert spectrum, I'm like way down this end of the introvert. And people are often shocked when I tell them that, or they don't believe me. I'm like, no, because this is many years of skill building in the making. I've worked on it and learnt the skills. So you don't feel like I'm an introvert, but I am. And it just goes to show sometimes people will believe, the myth that only extroverts make great speakers, and nothing could be further than the truth. Public speaking are skills. It's like plumbing. You learn how to do it, you practice a lot, and the more years of experience you have, the better you get. Public speaking, just the same. So my situation was that my preferred mode, and it's part of why speech writing is also still something that I do a lot of, is in text. I love writing and articulating my ideas that way. But what I was finding in my career was I would put together really quite kick-ass and compelling, proposals in writing and send them by emails, and they just weren't getting read. Newsflash, not everyone likes reading documents, no matter how fantastic they are. And then I would go along to a meeting, or I would see people in the hall, and there would be somebody who would be prepared to get up and champion their idea verbally and say it in a quite compelling manner. And even if that idea was not as good as the one I had comprehensively researched and put in writing, there was an engagement factor. They were championing their idea. They were prepared to step up and do it. And I watched time and time again those ideas getting up. And, it frustrated me, and I, whinged about it for, a nanosecond, and then realized this is not helping me. So I went, okay, well, I need to learn how to do this. As an introvert, as somebody who doesn't have this skill, I wasn't born with it, and went, okay, cool. So there's got to be a way that people are persuaded, because I didn't just want to flap my gums. I actually wanted to get the outcome if I was going to put in the work of learning how to speak well. So I did all the research, I skipped all the research about acting and how I didn't want to be an actor. So I didn't need the drama lessons. I didn't need what to do with your hands or, how to vocally modulate. That wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for, tell me the neuroscience. So I was looking into the neuroscience. I was looking into behavioral persuasion theories. I looked into the neuroeconomics, the science of what makes people make decisions and say yes, and then used myself as the guinea pig to say, okay, which of these strategies, how do I apply them to public speaking? Because the speaking that I'm interested in, the speaking that I coach people in, is strategic persuasive speaking. So what is going to get somebody to say yes? So if you want to be a great speaker who gives, really great and entertaining, wedding toasts, that's superb. You don't need me. That's not my area of expertise. I am very much about, let's sit down before you ever talk and work out, what is your target audience? What do you need them to say yes to? What will convince them? And now let's craft that to make them say yes. The flapping the gum thing, there are people who can help you with that. That's not my area of expertise.
I love that, because that's my exact answer. And I'm going to take your words, and I'm just going to start saying that exact same thing. You and I have talked about this a little bit. I think the fear of public speaking. When we talk about public speaking, just all of a sudden, before they even think about it, all of a sudden, the blood pressure goes up, and their face turns red, and oh my gosh, and their stomach gets upset. All these types of things, and the reality is, we do public speaking all the time, every day. Like you said earlier, before we started recording, public speaking starts when you walk outside your house.
100%. I say it to people all the time. They're like, I could never do public speaking. I'm like, do you ever leave your house and speak to another human? They're like, yes. I'm like, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're already public speaking. So that's fine. The public speaking you're probably doing is flapping your gums. Sure. But let's now look at if you want to do public speaking strategically to persuade people so you can champion your ideas and get them to say yes. And these are just skills I can teach you how to do them.
I say it's not hard. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science, but sometimes it is hard. It is hard work because it's a change in mindset. We have to think a little bit differently about how we're communicating, right? Because you think about it from this perspective, and I've used this example a couple of times over the last 3 or 4 days. When you go to a restaurant and the waiter or waitress comes up to you and asks you what you want, how are you going to respond? There are some people that I know that say, well, can I have this? Or I want this, right? When you say, can I have this? Well, you're asking them permission to do something. But when you tell them this is what I want, the whole tone or attitude of the conversation changes, right? You're not asking for permission. You're saying, this is what I would like from you. And so that in and of itself is a mindset shift. Or when you go to the grocery store, just taking baby steps. These are low, low stakes types of conversations. But if you don't know how to tell if an orange is ripe or fruit is ripe, what are you going to do? Are you going to buy unripe fruit, or are you going to ask somebody? And those are skills that we do have to learn. But examples of learning how to communicate for things that you want and want help with as well.
Yes, and I think the mindset shift is so important. One of the things that I've learned from using myself for many decades as a guinea pig and someone who was a nervous and anxious speaker, and also coaching over 100 TEDx speakers now, many of whom would say that they are extraordinarily nervous and anxious speakers, particularly when you're playing at that level, is that you need to rethink how you think about fear. So what has become an absolutely foundational pillar of the coaching and the speaker coaching and strategy work that I do is, put into, a short catchphrase is own your awesome. So, I'm always telling people, and we do this work at the start, before we start talking about a script or what your strategic objective is, or all of those things that come before you ever talk about stagecraft, is the people need to be prepared to own their awesome. And that's usually where, if we get that right at the very beginning and we do that transformative piece of work, then all of the other things become easier, dramatically easier. And when I say own your awesome, what I'm talking about is changing how you perceive fear. Because the thing I have learned over 20 years and, all these speakers is when people say they're afraid of public speaking, when I used to say I'm afraid, I have a fear of public speaking, you're not afraid of public speaking. I've yet to find somebody that is actually legitimately afraid of public speaking. What they're describing when they're talking about, I'm afraid I might look, I might forget my words. I'm afraid that I won't get on the stage. I'm afraid I'll fall down, on the way up to stage. Which if that's going to happen to anyone, it's going to do me, because I'm a screaming klutz. If I make it actually to the stage and the microphone, half the work is done. But what they're actually afraid of is not that. They're afraid of, a range of things. They're afraid of being embarrassed in front of respected peers and colleagues. They're afraid that if they do it and they, in their mind, fail, then it will just affirm any bad thing that has ever been said to them by a partner, a family member, a negative boss. They're afraid that they'll do it and they'll discover that my idea is not as good as I think it is because someone will naysay it. These are all very different fears. But what they are, I'm afraid that people will think I'm unattractive or focus on my body type, or I'm afraid that, and it's all external judging factors, almost always.
Yes.
And so when we sit down and do the work and go, look, when you say you're afraid of public speaking and we sit down and do that transformative piece that goes, cool, and then we realize you're afraid of being judged by this person, and I'm like, usually it'll start with, cool, they're going to think that, let them. We're not going to care. We're just going to let them. But now let's think about, that you're thinking about what if everything goes wrong, and we do that to say, what if everything goes right? What if everything goes right? And why are you letting some external person judge you? What if you trip over? What if this happens? What if this happens, but your idea is still fabulous and you pick yourself up and you do it really well? And then we list all the things that could go wrong. Like some people often will say one of their biggest fears is they'll forget their lines. I'm like, awesome. You've just made my day, because that is 100% in your control. So what we do with your script, how many hours you put into it before the event, whether or not you set your alarm to get up 1 hour earlier for 30 days beforehand to memorize that thing, that is 100% in your control. So we do the work, that mindset piece first, because every single thing that comes after is made easier once you address this perception that their fear is actually of public speaking, as opposed to fears of something else that they just conveniently label, because that's what society predominantly does, as a fear of public speaking.
Exactly. And would you say that is the biggest mistake that people make in their preparation, is the mislabeling of their fears, or the not being in the right mindset? Would you say that's the biggest problem?
I think there is no one biggest problem. I think public speakers, like humans, are absolutely, every single one is unique and different.
Yeah.
So what some people may legitimately have no fear of public speaking, and frankly, that's a problem. Yes. Because they're cocky and they're egotistical and they've skated by on charisma all their life, so they're not putting in the work. Right. It's I'll just slap together a PowerPoint and jump up on stage and I'll think about it the day before what I'm going to say. That's a totally different problem, but it's a problem. Some people may have really great self-esteem, so they don't have fear per se, but maybe they haven't put in the work. So I think there are different fears, different problems, but I think, the biggest ones that I see recurring that you could kind of, put into groups. One is definitely not having the wrong mindset, which is either I'm not going to put in the effort because I'm just going to dial this in, or I have a fear of public speaking, which actually is a fear of something else. And as soon as you own it and understand it, we can come up with a strategy about whether that's just let them and we're just going to not care, or cool, here are the things you're worried about. Let's write down every single one of them and then come up for a strategy to mitigate that. So that's, fears, an absence of planning for when things, planning and preparation to make sure that whatever you're worried about, let's not just let that fester in the back of your mind. Let's come up with a plan for every single thing that could go wrong, down to like zombie apocalypse. Let's have a strategy. Because then it's a strategy. It's a plan. You know what you're going to do. So it's not taking up free rent in your brain where you could otherwise be focusing on preparing for your talk. I think the other thing is just not putting in the work. That is a huge problem. If you see really lackluster public speaking, it's almost always an absence of effort. The people who, every year for TEDx, I will invariably get at least one person who is having a meltdown, hyperventilating into a brown bag or locking themselves in a toilet stall saying, I can't possibly come out. True story. And I will invariably have to get them from that stage to the stage. And, there is no common denominator about how experienced that speaker is, by the way. Sometimes that's a first-time speaker, though that's far less likely. The people who it most often is a person who has done lots of talking before, thought they could dial this in and it'd be like every other talk, didn't put in the rehearsal time, didn't put in the prep time. And the one comment that happens every single time, regardless of who this person is, whether they've spoken at 2,000 events or 10, is I should have rehearsed more. I should have prepared more.
So what's the difference between preparing for a TED Talk as opposed to like a regular presentation? Obviously, watching them, they're different, but what's the difference in the preparation?
Well, they can be incredibly different. The first thing that I would say in a single word when people ask me that is the stakes. That's the difference. Yeah. And so whether it's, we have things where a talk might appear, it doesn't have to be on a TEDx stage, but if you get invited to give a talk and, that's your target audience there, or there's somebody in there who can, greenlight your funding for something, or come on board as an angel investor, or change a piece of legislation, or, Oprah is not a TEDx talk, but if you got invited to go and speak with Oprah, the stakes are enormous. So, the stakes should directly reflect how much preparation you put into it, how much effort you put in it, how strategic you become. That's totally different. So if you're just, and I don't mean just, I hate that word, but if you're giving a talk at a local event, and there is a small number of your target audience there that could say yes to what your strategic objective is. And by the way, if there is none of your target audience there, why are you even speaking at the event? Go do something else. If your people aren't there with the power and authority to say yes to your strategic objective, and that doesn't matter whether it's about buying a product, buying a service, investing in your company, changing legislation, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
But what is your strategic objective? If they're not in that room, why are you? But if it's low stakes, then, maybe a little bit less preparation is fine. But as soon as you get to something that is high stakes, so if it's a pitch and you're pitching to people who could give you $1 million and change the trajectory of your company, that's big stakes. Put in 100 hours. If it's a TEDx talk, and that has the potential to consolidate your position as an expert in this particular space, that's game changing. At least 100 hours worth of effort. If you're not interested in putting in 100 hours worth of work into it, you don't want to come and talk to me. I'm not your person. Because I'll just be very frank with you and say, yeah, no, you're not serious. You didn't come to play. Go find somebody else. So really the difference between that is stakes. And the other thing is really important in that kind of category is a signature keynote. So I work with people as well who aren't doing a TEDx yet, or maybe they have done one, but they want to develop, they're at that stage in their business where they really want to consolidate their standing as an expert in this space. Maybe they're looking to then launch a book, launch a podcast, really be the go-to person in that. And so they want to put in the effort to develop that signature keynote that they can go and deliver prestige keynotes at different conferences on different continents and be the go-to person for this. That's a game-changing thing. You're looking to really consolidate. So that, again, high stakes, put in the effort and get it right. So one of the best things about those people, for example, who I've worked on their TEDx talks or their keynotes with, I will then later see, chapters in books, or I will see them speak on a radio interview or in a podcast, and they will use lines and sections directly from their talk or their signature keynote, because I never write and never work with a speaker with one talk in mind, like ever. Right, we work out what is the script, and I section the scripts as we work through them. Like, this is the section about XYZ. This is the section about XYZ. So once they've memorized and learned them, they've got them for life. Anytime they get asked a question about that, anytime they're preparing another talk and they just, I tell them, think of it as ingredients in your pantry. You can cook a whole range of different recipes for that, whether it's a snack or a really huge and elaborate meal, and so many different meals based on these ingredients. And then think of each individual talk as a different recipe. So that's the way I do it, because I don't ever like people to put in time and effort on that kind of scale that they can't reuse over and over again for the rest of their life.
So that piece is really interesting to me. To as you're preparing for that, it's being able to use that in multiple different settings, and I like that. But what I really like is the whole idea of preparation. For me, research and preparation, just like you, it's key. It's key to everything that we do. if you're not going to do the work, why are you even bothering to put your name in for something? So I think people have to understand that if you to be good at anything, you have to prepare and you have to practice over and over and over again.
100%. And I think, don't get me wrong, I have clients that originally came on board with me as what I call SOS clients. People I've known professionally who will leave it to the last minute. Maybe it's a week out, and will say, oh my gosh, I have, this event. I promised to speak at it ages ago. Life happened, work happened. I haven't done a single thing, or I've got a really dodgy first draft. I only have this much budget. I can buy 3 hours of your time. Can you do what you can? And if I can fit it in, I usually will, particularly if I know them and I know they're not half-assing it, but,
Right.
Life has happened. And you give them your time and you elevate it. But at the same time, you're like, just so you know, this is the SOS version with the time you have available. But you should come and learn how to do all of this properly. And it's usually very funny because I think it's hilarious. The people who usually engage me this way, they're like, one of them, Jodie McNeil, she's actually one of the testimonial stories on my site. She was like, I'm a week out, and she's a highly experienced CEO, and she's done lots of public speaking, but she just hadn't done it in a little while. I mean, she's a ludicrously confident woman. And she just said, at this point in time, I'd rather quit my job than do this with me in a week, which, I get it was tongue in cheek, but it shows the level of, and this is a highly, highly experienced and confident woman. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Send it to me and I'll spend a few hours on it. But she's like, I'm never public speaking again after this. This is just a one and done, because I'm talking to her about, hey, I'm just noting this. This will go into your section for the future. Anytime you answer this, let's get it right. So anytime in the future you get this question, we'll do it. She's like, you don't have to worry about that because I'm never, ever speaking again. I'm like, I'm like, just letting you know, Jodie, 100% of people who come to me in this way say this is the only time I'm ever going to do this and I'm never doing it again. And currently it has 100% failure rate in that they come back to me, and as soon as they know how to do it and can see that it will work, then they're like, oh my gosh, I need to go and get more speaking gigs. She's like, no, not going to happen. And the message I got from her after she'd walked off stage, she said it was like the most amazing thing. She said, I walked off stage and I just wanted to turn around like it was an amusement ride and say, can I go again? So yes.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you, what would you say was I wouldn't say your most difficult person that you work with, but the most challenging. I guess it's those people that are just like that, saying, I'm never doing this again. And then, I guess they see that it's not it's not as bad as they made it out to be.
They're absolutely not the most challenging in any way. They're quite delightful because I know that they're going to say it now. I've years and years of experience. I know they're going to say, I'm never doing it again. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Not a problem. And I know that's not true. Well, not so far. Never had somebody who then doesn't say at the end, that was great. Now that I understand how this works, I want to do it more and more and more. But I suppose the most challenging would be people who have been trained in a different way. So I select all of our TEDx speakers, and we have input from our team. We watch people for up to about 2 years usually before. So we're listening to every podcast they're on, every news article. We're reading at least the executive summary of their and the top and tails of their PhDs or their books. So we really do a very deep dive to make sure that the idea is great before we're going to put them on the stage. I think one of the things that makes us, pause for a moment before having somebody speak, or bringing them into to speak on our stage because it just might not be a good fit, is anyone who has clearly been coached to speak in a particular way. So, for example, because they don't want to undo it, they don't want to let it go. So, we have certain types of speakers, like people who speak as though they're presenting an afternoon special on so everything, it sounds like this. And you're like, oh my gosh. And, that's a lot of work. People who have had some kind of theatrical or drama training as part of their public speaking training previously and want to do this and really, that's not TED style, for lack of a better term. It's people these days really, they're not looking for Shakespearean, pretense. They really want to have an authentic engagement with the person who's speaking. They want it to feel more like a conversation. I mean, there are certain industries absolutely where it is still very much hype and pomp, and that is absolutely right. And if I get a client who's, wants to go and speak at something in big pharma, I'm like, okay, this is a totally different book for how this is done. But for the most part, when you're speaking at conferences or TEDx events, people want to have that personal engagement. So it's more about authentic, sincere things. So untraining people who've been trained based on very old school ideas or dramatic ideas of public speaking over the idea of, neuroscience and persuasion, that can be really challenging.
So I guess for me, the way I'm thinking about it is, knowing who your audience is and being able to, take that same message and change the way you present it, change those types of things to match that audience and how important, I'm looking at my audience now. Hopefully you all have gotten that by now, that to me, the audience and preparation is two of the most important things that you can do, or are the most important things that you can do. But then being able to acknowledge that and change that message to that audience. If you're giving the same idea or the same talk to different audiences, right?
100%. Your audience is everything. So first of all, know what your strategic objective is to speak. What and that, by the way, that can never be the word awareness. If you've ever used the word awareness, I'm speaking away, raise awareness. Stop that. Awareness gets you nothing. Think of it in terms of like sun cancer, which, Australia, sun cancer, skin cancer. But, I could be as aware out the wazoo about skin cancer and not change a single behavior. You don't want me to be aware. You want me to put on a hat, put on sunscreen, put on sunglasses, okay, wear a shirt when I'm out. That's behavioral change. I'm saying yes to changing your behavior. You want me to understand the UV index and decide when I go outside. That is a behavioral change I'm saying yes to. So when you're working out your strategic objective, which you should do every time before you agree to speak somewhere, is what is my strategic objective of speaking at this event or in this business meeting, or whatever it is. And that should always be phrased as a question someone can say yes to. So I want you to put up this legislation in Congress that will change reform. Yes. I want you to buy these products. Yes. I want you to sign this petition. Yes. Tangible behavioral change, never awareness. So work out what your strategic objective is. Then to do that, you need to know who your target audience is. And your target audience has to be who has the power to say yes and do it.
Exactly.
Because there are so many people who can be disinterested or say no and get in your way. Who has the power to say yes? That's who you should be speaking to. And then absolutely you should tailor it to them. I was talking to somebody the other day who had to go and pitch something to a couple of different people in an organization to potentially get some work signed off on. And they came back to me to say, I just heard I'm actually going to have to do this as 2 separate meetings because the 2 key decision makers can't be in the same room at the same time scheduling. I'm like, gold. That is the best thing
perfect.
ever I have ever heard.
Right.
Because one is the CFO who's only going to care about money. That's a gross generalization, but that's what they're being paid to do.
Right.
And one is about HR and interested in equity and retention and recruitment costs. So you have got this one, pitch you're trying to get them to say yes to. Yes, we're going to engage you to deliver this project in our company. One of those presentations is just going to be tailored to be focused almost entirely about numbers. And the other one, like the cost saving, the benefit, and the other one is going to include things about, workload, sure, but also about equity and representation of women in their non-traditional workplace and those kind of things. So, very, very different audiences, same yes at the end, but you should never, ever deliver the same presentation twice. It should always be, even if it's only 10% different, but, a minimum 10% difference to show that you know who that audience is and you're letting them know, I know who you are in this room. I know what your challenges are. I know why you're interested in this topic. And here's some, takeaways that you can put into action straight away for you based on that. And that should not be generic. To get up and give exactly the same speech over and over again with no variations is a real disservice to that audience. And it says, I'm just phoning this in. I haven't taken the time to research your company, your organization, your event, to know how to absolutely show value to you as a unique collection of humans.
And that's so important. And that's a great example. The whole idea that, two completely different audiences there with HR and finance. Now you really do have that opportunity to refine it and target each of them to get that yes, right? And that's where if you're just doing the one presentation there, you're still trying to get the yes, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult to take those diametrically opposed viewpoints or ideas to get that yes. So that's awesome. In terms of engaging audiences, what are some of your favorite ways that you as a presenter like to engage audiences in different settings? Because I think that's another really important thing that sometimes we forget about, because when we're on stage or when we're giving that presentation, we get so in our heads to not forget our lines or to worry about our timing or whatever. So what are some ways that you like to really engage the audience?
First of all, I love that this questions come immediately after the last question because they are directly related. There are 3 points I really think I need to make. First is that most people, when they come to me and they want help with engaging the audience, or they immediately go to dramatic art forms. So they're thinking about, what do I do with my hands? How do I move about the stage? How many times do I have to look at different people? What are the strategies for that? And I'm like, okay, I can absolutely talk to you about that stagecraft element. But if you think of your presentation and delivering a truly engaging presentation that is strategic, and again, I don't care how engaging you are unless it's strategic and we're getting to yes at the end. Go and talk to somebody about an engaging, wedding toast, totally separate thing. But the reason we care about engagement is because we want to get people to yes. But, if you think of it as a 100-meter sprint at the Olympics, what you do with your hands and your vocal modulation and where you look, that's like the last 5 meters of that race. It's going to make the difference at the finish line, and that can be incredibly important. But no one's like, that 5% does nothing for you if your actual talk is crud. So, yes, there are things you can do. You want to make sure that you are not so much of a robot that you're standing and not looking at the audience. My best tip that I say to people is imagine you're sitting having a conversation with a friend in a coffee shop. Pay attention to how often you use your arms and your gestures and things. And that's how often you should do it. Because, otherwise people can tell. It feels, it doesn't feel authentic if you're suddenly thrusting in arm gestures. It's weird. You want them to feel like you're having a conversation just with them. So, coffee chat arms are perfect. The other thing I say to them is that you've got to think of gestures like alcohol. So if I handed you a 700 ml bottle of vodka and you had one significant gesture, so you have one glass, pour the whole bottle in there, well, that is a very, very, very strong thing, which people will remember and will dramatically emphasize a point. But if you put out 20 shot glasses and poured it across 20, that's like dramatically weakens the strength of each one of those drinks. So the more overt gestures you have, the weaker the influence and impact of each one. So think of gestures like a bottle of alcohol, and how strong do you want them to be? How weak do you want to do? Because the more you spread it out, the weaker they become. So that's in terms of the stagecraft or the dramatic part of it. I think the other thing that's really important is that if you, the work comes at, following on from our last question, if you want your talk to be engaging, the work happens when you set your strategic objective and when you understand your audience and you tailor something specifically for them. And you can tell you've achieved this because A, they'll feel engaged. But the second you start talking and start mentioning things that are relatable to them, because you've investigated it and you let them know that you understand that you have this particular problem and that you have a solution for it, that person in the audience who might have just heard 3 other people speak and, you know, they might be double screening on their phone, will suddenly start hearing things like, oh, you know, this is particularly for, let's say, for example, you know, professional women who are struggling to juggle the challenges of parenting and career. If that is somebody in the audience, they will hear that, they will look up and they will pay attention and they will feel like this presentation, oh my gosh, this presentation has been written specifically for me because it has. Right. And they will then be engaged. So if you want your audience to be engaged, the secret is to actually know who they are, work out what will deliver them value, tell them that, show and demonstrate you have an authentic understanding and can help them, and then they will be engaged. And it's none of these, you know, sometimes people use the word tricks. It really, you know, it's not something I feel happy with, because people say,
No,
you know, can you give me the tricks to get people to pay attention or to feel engaged? I'm like, if you're going with the mindset that you're trying to trick your audience rather than authentically engage and serve them and deliver, then that's your first problem. You shouldn't be trying to trick them by having, look, my presentation is pretty ordinary, but I'm going to chuck in some like dramatic, you know, things to get your attention and you're magically going to be engaged. Maybe they are more engaged, but you're not going to get them to yes if the content of what you're putting together isn't. So, you know, I think to be engaging, you need to write really, really great content that is strategically crafted to them. So content is king. To do that, you need to really, really understand and respect your audience. So understand who they are, what will give them value, and serve. Don't sell. Don't try and trick them. It's not a dodge or a hustle. And 3, understand, yes, stagecraft is a part of it, but it is the last 5 meters in a 100-meter race. And what will far more likely engage them well and keep them engaged is the quality and caliber of what you say and your knowledge, and that you show authentically you are not trying to dodge or hustle them. So the person in the audience that you need to get a yes from, whether that's 1 person or 1,000 people, will go, oh my gosh, this presentation feels like it was written just for me. She's talking to me.
Exactly. Yeah, such a good point. I think that the whole idea of stagecraft is so overblown and overused. And like I said, like you said, I think people see that they're trying to be tricked. I mean, you know, we don't walk around talking to people flailing our arms all over the place, or that's not natural. It's not normal. And you know, I'm a big believer in just being you and being authentic with who you are and how you communicate with people. And if you were to get on stage or get in front of a group of people and start flailing your arms around, people know that's not how you normally talk. It's not how you normally are, right? And it's going to throw them off.
Absolutely. And so, but it's also the vocal tone and the way you speak. I had a really lovely client, new client come and actually flew into my city, flew themselves into my city a couple of weeks ago to have a in-person coaching, and was really excited to share their draft presentation, and they got up and delivered it. I listened. A brilliant idea, incredibly talented and bright person. And I just, you know, I'm like, okay, what you have done just then, just so you know, you just delivered a dramatic monologue and not a speech or a talk. And I get a lot of that. It happens quite often. I'm like, do you understand the difference? If it feels like I could have seen that delivered on stage in a theater as part of a monologue in a play or a show, then that's a dramatic monologue. You have preached at me. Right. You didn't give a speech or a talk that was going to persuade me. And so the language was wrong. The idea is brilliant. The language was wrong. And it really, I'm like, you have spent a lot of time and effort writing what is a dramatic monologue. And that is not a speech or a talk that will persuade anyone. They're going to feel lectured at and not conversed with.
Exactly. And I hope people understand that, because, and again, if you feel lectured at, people will shut down, and they'll shut down quick, and your call to action won't be followed up. That's just that. So, well, Juanita, I love the name of your business, Full and Frank, and I think you just demonstrated why you named your business Full and Frank. And why don't you tell everybody why that is? Because again, I think we're the same people, and it's to me, it's obvious.
Well, when I first went out and decided to go out alone and I left the corporate world, I knew I didn't want, for me, it didn't feel right to have something that was like Juanita Wheeler at Associates. It just was not a good fit for the way that I operate. And so we, with my creative director, who's based in Texas, we sat down and wrote words that more appropriately described my manner. And it was interesting because it was things that often in the corporate world, people would say, you're brilliant, but you're too blunt. Or, I agree with everything you just said, but you're just a little bit too frank. But other people would love it. And so, I had no intention of dialing it back. I'm like, This is who I am. Right. And honestly, if I can tell you something in 5 minutes, especially if I'm charging by the hour, I'm going to tell you in 5 minutes, and then let's get to work with the rest of that 55 minutes of that hour. I'm not going to spend 3 hours worth of consulting to get to nicely, get you there something I can tell you so much faster. That just to me feels, again, disingenuous, and, I makes me feel icky. Like I need to go and have a shower afterwards. I've dealt with those consultants. I do not appreciate them. So I just went, no. So we went through a list, and at the end we got, we were down to like comprehensive but blunt, and full and frank. And full and frank was more catchy. So we went with that, and I love it. It's a little over 11 years in business now, and I still love it, which they say is a great sign. If your business is a particular number of years old, the older it gets, if you still love the name, then it was a good choice. So I kind of feel like it's both my company name, but also it's kind of like a product disclosure statement. You can't be surprised if you you become a client or you do an onboarding thing and you get some very frank feedback, which, sometimes is, I love your idea. Everything you just did was wrong, but it can all be fixed.
And like you said, again, you get right to work fixing it, and not having to rub somebody's back and tell them it's going to be okay. You really are smart. You really are the best ever. Let's just get down to work and figuring it out and get busy.
I'll say it in a sentence. Your idea is brilliant. It's world changing. The entire world needs to hear about it. Let's make this happen. Everything you just did in terms of speaking is wrong. Let's fix it. But it's all fixable. Let's do it. Let's start right now. Yes. And the other thing is, I'll tell people everything they need to know and absolutely nothing that they don't. So, before I put any content out or I do any sessions with people, I'm like, is this, I have three ticks. Is this authoritative? Is this the best thing based on all the research I've done and all the fact checking and all my experience? So is it authoritative? Is it sincere? Because I'm a sincere person. I always want to make sure that I work with people who I believe in what they're doing, and I want to amplify the work they're doing because I do believe that the world needs to know. And, the third one is it blunt? Because I am.
That's awesome. See, I'm called abrasive. And
I have been called abrasive so many times in my life, especially as a woman. And I've been in meetings where I've seen someone being called, oh, aren't they, assertive? And like 3 minutes later, I'm abrasive. And exact same behavior. But yes, no, I get abrasive a lot, but I will never be cruel. I will tell you what you need to know in the shortest amount of time. Because I believe in you and I want to help. So if you're getting, frank feedback, if I'm even bothering to give you feedback, I believe in what you're doing and I want to help you do it well.
And that's a perfect way to explain it. So where can people get in touch with you or find out more information if they want to work with you?
Well, a really great place to start is my website. I actually have a tools page, which has a number of free guides and downloads, which is a great place for people to start. It's fullandfrank.com/tools. And other than that, you can find me, Juanita Wheeler, on LinkedIn and drop me a message, or you can go to my Linktree and I can provide you with the address to put in the show notes.
And Juanita, thank you so much. And I'll put all those in the show notes for everybody. I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us. And yeah, I value your friendship and the advice that you've given to our audience. I think it's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're incredibly welcome, Tim. I love what you're doing. Very happy to help your audience. And it has been a really delight talking with you today.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun. Summertime there, stay inside, stay cool. It's winter here. I'm going to stay inside and stay warm. So just the opposite.
Yeah, it's a bit like a jungle here today, but I'm not going to complain. I like the heat.
Well, you take care and we'll talk to you soon.
Fantastic. Talk soon.
Be sure to visit speakingwithconfidencepodcast.com to join our growing community and register for the Formula for Public Speaking course. Always remember, your voice has the power to change the world. We'll see you next time. Take care. I hope you enjoyed the latest episode of Speaking with Confidence. Give us a review to tell everyone why you love the podcast. You can also download, like, and share the podcast with friends. Be sure to visit formulaforpublicspeaking.com and sign up for the Formula for Public Speaking course. It's a step-by-step system to help you become the confident and powerful speaker you've always wanted to be. We'll see you next time. Take care.